So now it's my time to welcome Sumit. I'm certainly going to give him a professional welcome, but given a huge contingent of IITians here in the crowd, we'll have a personal touch to it as well. Sumit is a IIT Roorkee undergraduate who, after doing his master's from University of Minnesota at Minneapolis, had been an executive at Citrix Systems for a very long period of time, starting in Florida and then moving to California. He joined Citrix when it was probably a 300 people company, or maybe less, 200 people company, and it grew into a multi-billion dollar empire where Sumit himself was VP GM of a major part of the business, made multiple acquisitions, especially in the space of mobile endpoint devices. In around 2013 timeframe, Sanjay Poonan, a name who is very familiar in the TI circles in Silicon Valley, hired Sumit from Citrix to VMware to do something similarly bigger, where Sumit transformed the end user computing business. And it was under his watch in Sanjay when they acquired AirWatch. The business grew from a few $100 million to a $1.5 billion business. Sumit did that for almost 4 to 5 years, then moved on to become CEO of Instart. It's a company which is focused on security. The next panel we will have after lunch. Sumit has been instrumental as CEO of the company and transforming the company to focus on one particular sector, which is cybersecurity, and of course, with application of artificial intelligence. Most of the panels and discussions today have been around giving you guys an understanding of how AI is fitting into enterprise. With Sumit, we will basically figure out and talk to him about how do you actually make money in enterprises. And he has actually done that. Not 10, not 20, not 50. We're talking about a few $1 billion in revenue. So we'll have a very interesting conversation. And I always want to, when Sumit is here, IITians are here, I have to put up a little bit of a personal touch. So it was 1993 when I was myself selected in JEE and Roorkee exams, and I went to IIT BHU instead of Roorkee because of the choice of the branch. In 1998, I was on the verge of getting an offer from Citrix, which I could not, and I got an offer from Intel. So for the next 14, 15 years, I kept thinking I'm a very smart guy, IIT BHU undergrad, worked for Intel till 2014, when I met Sumit in VMware, a Roorkee alumni who went to Citrix, and who actually hired me, and it was my pleasure to work for him. It was a humbling experience, but it was a great experience. I had a chance to work with him and learn a lot, not just about business development, product management, but also about leadership, on which we have organized multiple events with him in the past. So welcome, Sumit.
Thank you.
Is it working for you? So, Sumit, first of all, congratulations on completing 1.5 years as CEO of Instart. And first of all, I want to know from you, how is it being different being CEO of a startup company which is backed by major investors like Andreessen Horowitz and Sequoia, versus being a senior executive in VMware when you're on the staff of the CEO of the company? Give us some perspective.
I think there are a lot of similarities, of course. At the end of the day, typically in an executive role or leadership role, you're transforming and growing the business, which was what was needed in Instart as well. I think the biggest difference, which of course was a learning experience for me as well, given first time CEO and first time in venture-backed, late stage venture-backed, but still early from the case of business side, is just the costs related to customer acquisition, right? So, and that sort of will be a little bit of the theme that I'm going to weave in the case of AI, because we at Instart we had this great platform with amazing data and intelligence models on top of it, and how we leveraged it across building multiple applications made total sense. But when you account for how you go to market and how you get, how you truly sort of model the cost of acquiring a customer, the economics are very different, in the two models, and of course, cash becomes king for the venture stage companies, and that was to me the biggest difference. Outside of that, you still need the strategies, you still need to live in the means and the resources you've got, and you got to have the great team to make you move forward. No difference there.
Makes sense, by the way, which reminds me, one of the interesting books you once referred to us when we were working with VMware, called Starting with Why from Simon Sinek. The book still helps. So now moving on to areas of opportunities in enterprise AI, We have standalone AI solutions from companies like Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, in automatic speech recognition, natural language processing and stuff. We have applications spanning across internal and external boundaries in security and fraud. We have some hidden workflows like digital workspaces. Would like to, get your views on both the rate of adoption and how you see these three different pillars emerging in enterprise AI in terms of where the actual revenue is expected to generate.
I think the platforms are getting well established, making it easier for people to build applications, and I do like the AI as a service thing that was mentioned. I think makes total sense because that'll happen whether it's organic in bigger enterprises or shared service across multiple companies. I think at the end of the day, the applications really fit into 4 categories with different buyers in my assessment. One is around more sort of customer service, which can be in the product or the service a company offers to ongoing experience of the customer. Just a lot of opportunities there. I think the panel before here talked about how it can be done for healthcare. Every industry has that opportunity. I think second is operational effectiveness, if that's how a company sort of differentiates. If I'm a water treatment plant, then you can apply AI in how to treat it more effectively with lower waste, which is possible. Companies are doing it at this stage in a very effective way. Third is around risk compliance, whatever you want to call it. Security, IT security fits into that. I think there are other sort of factors in it. And then I think the fourth category will be human workflows, the workforce workflows, because it has become a category of customer spend, and customers are willing to buy software. Of course, these 4 are interrelated, right? And somehow people build business cases that tie more than one category. But in my experience, the selling and creating a business, you have to pick one as the primary and lead if you are on the side of a vendor building products to sell. And there's money to be made across all 4 categories. The faster you pick one, the faster you pick your market, build your selling motion, the better you are.
That makes complete sense. And one question before we jump onto the original schedule of stuff we had discussed was, so when you go to a senior executive in an enterprise company, and we had this question when Tracy was presenting, how do you explain them or win their minds here in terms of value proposition and ROI? When it comes to investments which will require some sizable check amount to be written, and then the ROIs will come over a period of time. I mean, these companies are working. AI does not introduce something new. How does that conversation go? Yeah. I do have an answer you gave us in one of the previous sessions. I want to see if that answer has changed.
Well, first of all, I think in the enterprise B2B selling, it's a long sales cycle. Healthcare probably is the only one that can get worse than that. So we know that. The good news is, I do agree. I think Tracy said that there is interest in the customer base to evaluate new technologies. Now, that's a big problem if you're a vendor, okay? Because I'd rather hear no quickly. And I think the problem right now is that this interest, which is not leading to any meaningful adoption fast enough, is causing huge delays in the sales cycle, okay? So to me, I think that's a big trap that you have to avoid. It's great for folks like KPMG. It's bad for vendors. It's just, that's the truth. So I think the sort of this whole adoption cycle is a fairly big challenge. So now the question is greed or fear, right? At the end of the day, those are the only 2 things that sell. So now you gotta pick one, and fear always trumps greed. So so on the fear front, when I took over the Instart role, that was the big issue that I had, where there were powerful, we are sitting in the data flow for when you're going out and seeing, visiting, applications, mobile applications, websites, etc. So we've got tons of data, and we've got amazing models that you can use the data to train it for doing all kinds of applications. And the company, for install base expansion perspective, kept building more and more apps. But then when you have to acquire or land a new customer, didn't have the appropriate strategy and was burning cash at an extremely high rate. And the problem that I saw was, it's more instinctive to think that ROI-based models, and you create that kind of a sales conversation, and it wasn't working. It just wasn't working because lack of customers' own practices in adopting a solution that is true revenue or ROI centric were not mature enough in this kind of a space. And that's a challenge in the AI industry for any venture sort of backed or any kind of venture. It doesn't matter how the company's invested as you're building the company to scale. So we decided to go after the fear aspect, okay, and decided to focus our company in one area rather than diluting ourselves as an AI-driven platform. It's now a cybersecurity company. And that transformed our cost of customer acquisition to be highly manageable, more repeatable sales motion, as well as focus for the entire company. Not to say that we can't expand to more revenue generation applications once we've landed a customer through cross-sell initiatives, but it became very, very predictable sales cycle. So coming back to how to sell into the enterprise, I still believe, I don't know if that's the answer I gave you before. I think it's greed and fear, and fear trumps greed. As long as you can have it, great, more predictable, you can make it excellent. And there is a genuine problem that I have observed where customers want to try it. So you engage, now you're hooked, now you're into the sales cycle, you truly think this is something that you can manage to grab with a very low, not necessarily I would say win rate, but true win rate where you've won a meaningful size business into an account. So as a result, you're spending all this effort up front into an account with no meaningful revenue coming at the back for a long time. And that's a trap you have to avoid and learn pretty quickly is what I've observed in this space.
Makes sense. Now, the reason I mentioned one of your previous conversation was it was more of a leading question, so let me now go back to that.
Yeah.
You did not, contradict yourself. That's a good news. But you did miss something which I want the audience to hear again. It was an eye-opener for me after I had gone on hundreds of enterprise calls at Amazon Web Services, and then getting to learn that from you. And that was, and maybe the answer has changed after you joined.
I think I know. Are you saying that you don't sell to companies, you sell to people?
Yes. So that is something which is much more interesting.
It's greed and fear. It's greed and fear.
So in case of AI, that should work even better because it's going to boost the ego of some of these executives who are making a decision that they are being associated with a very good technology. What I'm curious is that still true? Hello, is that still true or is it not working?
No, it's absolutely true. At the end of the day, I do believe you don't sell to companies, you sell to people, right? And people are, of course, trying to make a decision that is in the best interest of the company, but they're really making a decision that's in the best interest of them. And many times it's aligned, but there are nuances when it's not. So, of course, the fear aspect is losing a job if XYZ happens, sometimes trumps even more than losing companies' information, data, blah, blah, blah. And greed is about not necessarily revenue that a company could make, but potentially a person getting promoted. And you got to play to that. At the end of the day, that's what sells over everything else, and it works.
That makes sense. So coming to getting a little bit more deeper into something you mentioned, and I'm not going to follow just a script here. Customer acquisition, we talked about it. Now, one thing which we want to understand, a lot of people who are associated with TIE want to do startups in this space, and they have already done some startups in this space. Customer acquisition cycles anywhere enterprise are longer, and AI space is more trickier. Now, a lot of people here are investors, both angel investors and VC investors sitting in the crowd right now. I know you are right now running a company which has got some top investors of Silicon Valley, and they are great investors, I'm pretty sure. Based upon your own experience, what would you advise the VC investors or people who are making investments to keep in their mindset when they're putting money into an enterprise AI company versus a general enterprise software company in terms of their patience, perseverance, and outlook when it comes to customer acquisition, both time and cost? Hopefully my question was not too long.
Yeah, I got it. I think first of all, the AI, I fundamentally believe the power of AI and how rapidly you can build solutions and the value that they offer is amazing. Okay, no question. I think everyone here understands that. And I think that's what gets money put into these companies. I think there are two major challenges. One is what was talked about, which is this nature of experimental aspect where you get enough customers to take a small bite and then get more capital into the company based on that. That's risky because you can start spending too fast, too soon, without cracking the code on how you're going to land sort of major size deals. And I see that quite a bit because of just the nature of where the technology is. And hopefully we'll get past it, but it's still a ways to go. So I won't harp on that. I think the second one in this case, which is quite important, is because at the end of the day, it's a data-based sort of offering, and you need data, right? And so as a result, there is a cost of customer acquisition issue where how are you going to get the data, and how would that factor into either time or capital that'll be required for you to have enough data to train your models and systems effectively, or a business model question, which is the business model enables, I don't know, freemium, some distribution, some collection of data in a way which can take time and as well, but a different capital requirement. And then there is a architectural or a platform aspect where are you replacing something that's existing, seamlessly attaching to something that exists and are able to collect data in a rapid way. You have to, in a way, when I say architectural, is like your technology needs to get into the data path in some way, some way. If your business model doesn't, or time horizon that you have for building, from a capital perspective doesn't. The third model is you got to get into the data path in some way. And I think I've seen just a tendency of those two things, given how new this space is not accounted for. I'm not saying that investors are missing it altogether. It just feels like there is less of a conversation on these topics in the boardrooms for investors. And this applies, the problem is less acute for larger incumbents who are sitting on the troves of data, which they've already solved, right? It's less acute, it's easier to solve. There are other issues, which they are large organization, decision making, prioritization, stuff that was mentioned. But when a company is solely focused on that problem as a vendor, it's an issue, and it adds up pretty quickly because you're paying your teams. Of course, you built the product. Now you're paying your teams up front to go get customers or acquire customers somehow, and then it takes time for you to train the data, and yet the customer is not willing to proceed in any kind of a platform adoption that limits the ability to collect the data. So it's a significant problem, and hence the two issues that I mentioned are highly interrelated for investors who are backing the companies. If you're backing someone that's established who's sitting on the data but needs to do platform transformation or more as a private equity kind of not early stage but more later stage company to transform, I think AI is an amazing tool to fundamentally reshape the company. An amazing tool because you've solved those two problems in a pretty effective way or pretty quickly. And I don't see, so on one end I see the mistakes being done where you don't account for that in an early stage company from venture as much as they should. And on the other end I see an opportunity where the companies that are sitting on the data can be, their valuation can be changed by applying AI pretty rapidly because you can fundamentally create new services or gain competitive differentiation, but in the structure that they're in, it's not allowing them to do so. And that's what the investors can do in a very effective way. So I see opportunities and pitfalls from the investor perspective.
So I'd like to dig a little bit deeper into two topics which you have kind of mentioned in your answer. I'll pick the first one, which is when startups get into AI space, they have a cold start problem. They typically do not have relevant data to train their models till they go to companies, and till they have relevant data, their models will not be, models do not themselves distinguish each other much. AI has been around for 50 years, or more than 50 years, so you typically have models that you can use. It's about the kind of data that you have access to train the model. Now, so that's a challenge, and some of the bigger players like Google and Amazon or Microsoft have much more historical data. They will continue to have more historical data. But then there is an associated problem that you start a company, maybe use general data from places like Dun & Bradstreet and stuff like that, gets a model trained, go to a customer, and they will say, okay, come over, you have to first do data cleansing. I mean, you can't just deploy an AI model. There's a huge amount of services component to it, where you have to get access to their data, clean them up, and then get that data to train your model further. And till you have gone through 4 or 5 customers, you really do not have a model which sells. So these two problems for AI-based startups, which is lack of access of data, and your company actually being a services company for some time before it actually becomes a product company. Would you like to elaborate that a little bit from your Instart experience? Because that is something which is always in the mind of the entrepreneurs, and also something which investors need to understand. I'm trying to doing a double click on your previous question.
Yeah. I think first of all, we didn't have as big of an issue in Instart because we are in the data path, so we had the architectural benefit of seeing a lot of data. And in the world of web, the data is more readily, it's more open and easily available. But I understand the issue. I do think that I'm an advisor for a couple of companies that have this problem where you almost, you have great data scientists, you've trained the models, you've got a workflow built out on top of that provides unique value, but you just don't have enough data in the models. And they're going through that approach of how they would populate the data through either one of them is trying out a business model sort of approach of training their system, which is through a freemium-based approach of having enough value offered into a set of customers, which gives them enough data for giving more. And it works. We've seen that model does work. Not a trial, but a true freemium model, because you are winning as well. You're collecting a rich amount of data as a result. And then another company has done a pretty clever job in attaching to an existing, more vertical-centric application through an API framework where they are able to provide, because it's so hard to go replace them, right? So they're adding and augmenting the systems that exist into the verticals. And they're doing it through an architectural approach of just attaching themselves into the application, where the value proposition with customers is great, simple integration into the existing systems, and then the training occurs for them. Now, they also had to go through, like you mentioned, they had to pause on selling and marketing for a while until they got enough data for across customers to be able to truly make the models more effective. And they're doing that with 3 to 6 customers. Now, in their case, 3 to 6 large customers with time will give them enough data where they can go start making money. But it took exactly what you mentioned, where the founding team effectively ended up becoming more sort of services, and they needed not hunters for hunting accounts, but more account managers for farming the data that they needed for hunters to come in later on to go win new accounts. And that's what they're going through.
Makes
so
sense.
Those are the only 2 or 3 ways you have to do it.
So what I'm going to do now is going to change the track a little bit. Since morning, I've seen a lot of audiences having a lot of questions. And in case of Sumit, he has certainly a hard stop at 12:30. He has a board meeting at 2 o'clock, so thanks for coming. What I'm going to do is, before we look at other questions, since we have 20 minutes left for this particular fireside chat, I actually want to give a chance to the audience, much more time. And if there are not any audience questions, we'll continue the conversation at our end. So questions from audience about enterprise AI, how do you start AI companies, how do you evaluate it, invest it, or in general questions about enterprise software. And if nothing else, Sumit has been a strong leader. So, we had leadership events that we had. Want to first of all open it to the floor? Yes, Gyani. Nihar, can we get a mic? One thing is very clear. IIT Madras asks very good questions, man. They do not have answers, but very good questions. Yes. Gyani, introduce yourself. Including the year of graduation. Look very young.
Okay, Jnani Palanikumar, IIT Madras 89. I also manage IIT Startups cohort program.
Great.
My question is, there are 1,200 security startups chasing the chief security officer. How do you differentiate the noise and signal from the 1,200 startups? My second question is there still an opportunity for the startups to innovate on this security space?
Yeah, so I'm assuming the question is broader than AI.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think security is to some extent, like fashion, to some extent, because, we continue to see more and more sort of, security spend goes up, number of companies go up, and yet more and more threats coming out, right? And I think the typical model of how any company gets set up, where you are sort of consolidating technologies into platforms, will work, but what ends up happening is that larger companies end up becoming consolidators of new technologies, and that's what they're spending all of their time, effort, and money into, because that's where the larger consolidation spend comes in. And I do think that until the new threats are coming in, there will be more and more space for new security startups. That doesn't mean all of them will get successful, right? We do hear about some that can hit home runs and go really big. But I do think that the opportunity for solving the emerging threats in the security space will still be vibrant in the startup space. And incumbents, the larger platform providers, will not be able to solve those problems. Now, as an investor, I can see the challenge. It's a true venture kind of a world where you'll have, very, very, very small percentages of getting big success and very high percentage of potentially, belly up, which is the case in the security space and will likely continue to be. There's nothing changing, in my opinion, that'll change it, right? If you see the larger players in the space at this stage, I mean, Palo Alto and maybe Zscaler with their sort of intent can, through their capital structure, can change that dynamic. But I doubt it. They have their platforms to now defend and protect, and they're going to go at it at their own, at their own pace, what they can do. And they're not going to solve everything that is emerging. They just can't. It's just nearly impossible. And in fact, I would say there's never been a better time, because the whole security incumbent industry is getting upside down with the emergence of cloud and AI. That, believe it or not, there'll be actually more proposals going into the venture world on security side, just because the traditional networking-based model of security just is not the future. So there's a lot more disruption left in that space. So there are two trends: disruption of the traditional architectures and continuous emergence of new threats. That'll drive more capital into it, and venture likes it.
And what I'm going to do is, before I go to the next question, I want to ask you a follow-up question on this, and also make a general comment between Zscaler and Palo Alto. I expect Zscaler to succeed a lot. The founder of that company is both an undergrad and a grad alumni from the same school. So, and he also lived in the same hostel where I lived in undergrad. So hopefully he'll succeed. But coming to a very different point on security, Gyani, most of the startups, when they start the company, they hope and expect that, that they will get acquired one day. I mean, not many companies really go through IPO. Few of them have. Now, at VMware, as a head of the whole end user computing business, you had done tie-ups with security companies, you had done M&A of security companies, you had passed on the companies as well. So want to get a perspective from you as a business leader that when you are actually acquiring companies or tying up them within security space specifically right now, what are the characteristics which went in your thought process? And one of the reasons I'm asking this question to you is, I still have that grudge against you. For 5 years back in 2014, you made me work on one of those projects during winter break. So I wanted to get back to you on that.
Okay, I'm sure you're going to hold grudge on that one for a while, but I'm not going to attempt to get rid of that grudge. So, listen, I think VMware was an interesting company because it didn't have any presence in security, and it's a tough market to crack if you're not in it. It's just a different buyer, different dynamic, and whatnot. So, that was sort of so we kissed a lot of frogs, and that was probably what you're referring to.
In my case, it was one frog whom I had to hug for a long time.
So we kissed a lot of frogs, thinking that hey, there may be a path forward to crack the code, and we did the due diligence, but we kept coming back to it's better for us to not necessarily, get into it ourselves, but do enough of an alliance-based model where we are winning through the halo effect into the budgetary and the space versus going at it directly. I think that now in terms of the M&A environment for security, I do think that based on what happens I think Zscaler will start soon becoming acquisitive, I would think. If I were to just predict, they'll get there. I think Okta is sort of market cap strong, very adjacent to the space or in it. And then McAfee hopefully comes into the public market and becomes acquisitive. They have done moves even being private. I think Palo Alto is extremely acquisitive and will remain so under Nikesh probably. So that's 4. VMware and Amazon, AWS, and Microsoft, all 3 platform providers have announced their intent. VMware recently entered the space with Carbon Black. AWS is holding a security conference now. Microsoft has a security portfolio. So how can the space not be acquisitive? I think it'll continue to be highly acquisitive because these companies are just getting their platforms right themselves. They're not chasing new threats. So it'll be very acquisitive space, I think.
And that's actually interesting. I completely forgot that Nikesh is right now leading Palo Alto, who actually happens to be not just an undergrad alumni of mine, but from the same department. And we actually have extended an invitation to him to be on the board of IIT Startups. So that was very interesting. Let's go to the next question.
Hi, thanks for giving me an opportunity.
You can stand up and tell your name so we can all hear your question.
So good morning, everybody. My name is Sita Raman. So my question is AI in general, nothing related to security. So most of the AI, right? In fact, every bit of the AI is based on statistics or linear algebra, principal component analysis, dimensionality reduction. So when I was a kid, when my mom showed me a picture of a cat, even 40 years later, I can still remember it's a cat, and I didn't know any of this stuff, right? No. So when is anybody out there thinking about an AI without statistics, without any of this mumbo jumbo?
I mean, I would think most people, when they think of AI, will think of, driverless cars and Alexa. I mean, what else would they think of? I think they are. I mean, I would think. I have a teenager. If I asked him, in fact, I'm going to text him after this, hey, what's AI? He's going to probably say Alexa. So I think it's there.
Go ahead.
So
what I will do is I'll go, dig deeper from technical perspective to give you a deeper answer.
Okay, is that I didn't understand the question. Maybe.
So his question was that when will we get to a point where AI model, when it looks at an image, instantaneously captures it for a longer period of time. So if you look at AI from modeling perspective, there are 2 kind of main models in deep learning. RNN models, recurrent neural networks, and CNN, convolutional neural networks. Typically for image and video recognition, we use convolutional neural networks. For rest of the stuff like NLP and audio, we use RNNs. The CNNs are becoming more and more powerful over a period of time. And look at it as evolution of human beings over a period of time. We are a much better species than we were 2,000 years back. In case of AI, that will happen in 5 or 10 years when AI models get much more data fed into them. So it's a process of evolution of CNN models over a period of time, just as human species have evolved. Once we are very close to, to some of the other animals like monkeys, where now we're still monkeys to some extent, but a much more smarter monkeys over a period of time. That's an aspect, and maybe Sumit, you can elaborate on the security
I'll
side.
sort of give an example in our platform.
Space, yeah.
In our platform, actually, it's less on the security that we do, but more on the images, because you mentioned the image thing. So our platform actually works. The way it works is it looks at different images that are being served through our platform, and it's able to categorize them in multiple different categories, whether it's a human portrait close-up, whether it's a person wearing a dress, or whether it's a landscape, it's a daytime shot, nighttime shot, etc. And then we use that all through the AI models that are available on how you could sort of use all the data across all our customers to categorize the images. And then based on that and different types of devices that you connect into, our system is able to only push the size of the images that human eye can't tell the difference. So you can just, as our customers load up one size image, you don't have to categorize anything. And then across all different types of networks, devices, scenarios, and types of images, our algorithms make that decision. Now, of course, we don't get it all right, and sometimes we have to do the training in the background and keep altering it. So much of that in the technology terms is, quite real today, which is, I'd say it's quite impressive.
Makes sense. Amrit Kallar, you have a question?
Hi, Sumit, for the talk. I was listening in, and I have a thought as well as a question, right?
Yeah.
So I think pertinent to the topic here on breaking into enterprise AI, I have a thought, just based on quick discussion and brainstorming at my, going solo on brainstorming. But my experience in enterprise space has been that, if we try to, instead of boiling the ocean, just address a niche in the market, that might, get into better returns as compared to just going after a big problem, right? For example, in retrospect, who would have thought that having chatbots employed for addressing some very standard customer questions is a groundbreaking idea. But there again, it's an easy win for most enterprises. And so that's one,
That makes sense, yes.
I totally agree. I 100% agree. I think, I'm assuming you're saying as a startup or someone who's starting up with doing, I totally agree. I mean, it applies even as a customer as well, but I totally agree. Especially because where the industry is at, I think we discussed, it's hard for them to move forward beyond a small pilot. So if they can see the problem in a very small scope, they'll move faster.
And the problem doesn't have to be groundbreaking. It could be something very, very
Totally agree.
common grievance amongst a lot of enterprise customers, right? So,
Totally agree.
So that's the thought. And then on the question, you mentioned 4 pillars, right, where AI can create impact in the enterprise space. You did mention operational effectiveness in the companies, right? So can you throw some more light on it?
Yeah,
As to,
like for example, if your true competitive differentiation is operational effectiveness, right? Like for example, if you're a manufacturing, assembly, water treatment plants, your Anheuser-Busch and how quickly you can create your shipping companies, your trucking AI is a very powerful tool to be much more effective. So that's sort of what
I think we have time for probably 1 or 2 questions. Okay. Yeah, mention your name.
Sure.
Good.
So I'm Rajat. I'm from IIT Kharagpur 2008. So we are working on the enterprise AI startup. Specifically, we are focusing on application monitoring and observability tools, like something
for
IT.
IT?
Mostly for IT, like API management and stuff. So we do have experience in working with some big companies like Nutanix and Google. The challenges I see that you mentioned, getting that initial data, even though we are innovating something on transfer learning, which requires significantly small amount of data, that's our innovation. Still, we need some amount of data. And even though one person in the organization wants to do some POCs, there are a lot of silos involved. So it invariably takes some data, as you mentioned. So do you see there is some way we can adopt some model like what Grafana has done? You might be familiar. Grafana is an open source observability platform. One part of their solution they're giving away as a freemium, and they have an enterprise version also. And
yeah, which is the freemium model. I said it's a great tool for AI, right? Because you can start with some value for free, or you have to have some architectural approach of attaching to existing data sources in a very low-touch manner. Those are the two I've seen work effectively for companies that I've advised.
So do you see that model will be increasingly adopted, like Grafana model in B2B space?
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason why not, because I think, especially in IT, they like free stuff. They don't have a problem with it.
So, okay, guys, so time for one more question. Maybe I can, let's go with him.
Tushar.
Okay, let's do that as a one more question. Sahil.
Hi, I'm Shal Kumar. Earlier in the conversation,
I'll bring the mic closer.
Earlier in the conversation, a few speakers back, somebody mentioned that AI-ready talent is limited.
Yeah.
There's a shortage. Can
Right.
you talk about that, not just from your company perspective, but from a larger viewpoint?
Yeah.
And what are the opportunities there?
Yeah, I think the companies still have, at least what we have run into in our experience, is this AI centralized group because of the lack of talent, and any times there becomes a data-centric conversation, that group oftentimes gets involved, which is both good and bad, and I think that's pretty common. But what we have seen now is that more and more larger companies have lines of businesses having their own experts. For example, we one of the large sort of retailers here, .com based, they sort of have very high expertise in their own big data and AI team, and they're doing their own models continually and looking at revenue assessments and in all kinds of ways using their data. And when you compare that to, let's say, we have customers in e-commerce space, because e-commerce, as you know, just very quickly falls off from the top sort of 3 to 5 to below, and those customers have very limited expertise. So selling to two of them is very different in our case. Okay, so in our case, when we sell to those larger accounts, we have to interact with these teams, and they're going to go and have much deeper conversations on how your data is modeled, how you are going to work with their systems and integrate with their systems. So we do have an approach, we do have a system, we have a solution for it, and the sales cycle is different and longer, and product requirements are different. And then we have what we call sort of our bread and butter deals, where they can very quickly understand the technology, but they're most interested in the value, and they move towards that quickly, and we don't have to have conversations on how we model, what we do, how we store data, where we do. They're just looking for integrations and rapid value value realization, and that's it. And I think that's different for those two. And the larger customers, I think it's still not quite one way. We have to deal with both line of business having their own AI or data teams, and sometimes even centralized someone into a digital, we've had, this is a head of digital transformation, and all the data and AI teams are underneath it. Not a big team, but still it's underneath it, and you have to work through them. And that's a complexity in the industry at this point. I think it'll change, it'll move more and more towards the line of business. If you're selling to line of business, it'll get easier, which is what we like. But if it's centralized, then there's no stake. It's just a service in the organization, and it's more complex as a vendor to sell into them.
Makes sense, guys. Unfortunately, it's 12:30. Sumit has to drive back. You think you have time for one more question, or I think it's.
I have to take Wahid's question.
So you know I'm already.
By the way, this is a real question.
Oh, most questions are real. This fireside chat was a real fireside chat. we had real issues and people had real questions, but that's okay.
You meant it was not artificial.
Absolutely.
So, Sumit, selling an AI product in the enterprise is a new, I'm talking now about the sales process. Right?
Yes.
What tricks have you used to kind of like bring it down from, things like fear in the minds of people about job loss, fear of data loss, or, data being used unfairly by the vendor? So
Yeah. I think, I don't know if you were there, I was talking about it. When I started at Instart, we had a very multi sort of dimensional selling motion across many apps, different buyers, and we had to focus and pick one, and as you know, either greed or fear are the only two factors for selling. So we opted to go with fear, and I think with fear it's a little bit easier. Then AI becomes almost a tool where you are rationalizing why your tech is a solution to this problem where without AI you can't get a handle of, right? Because fear is, hey, you can't get a handle of it, it's just too much data, you can do it yourself, but you're going to fail, right? Let AI help for you. So then you're just justifying the value and showing it and demonstrating it. And we've created some tools. For example, we created for fear in the industry for the problem we solve. We actually enabled consumers to go to their websites and share the issue through a tool in social media, and that drives awareness of the problems that can emerge in random locations where it emerges. So we've created some of those to create more interest, demand. Because in security there are so many threats, not everyone can plug every threat in. You just got to make sure that your threat is highest priority, and so that's what we have done in our case, and we have focused for sure in security, and as a result it's become much easier in the sales cycle because AI for more top line is longer cycle than AI for fear, and there you're just rationalizing that technology like AI is the only way that you can get a handle for a big sort of open set of issues that this particular threat has for you. So that's worked for us quite well.
So guys, this was really helpful. I think Sumit deserves a round of applause.